The radio
Target at
crackled with
300,
static,
wind
then
adjustment made.
silence.
Taking the shot!
Captain Marcus Rivera had
Reloading.
been leading SEAL Team Alpha for
Second
8
shot
years,
engaging!
but
Target
he had never
down,
heard
hold
silence
position.
like this. In the mountains of Afghanistan, silence meant death was watching. His team of 12 elite warriors had been tracking a high-value target for 6 days, moving through terrain so hostile that even the locals avoided it. But, now, with enemy forces closing in from 3 directions and their extraction point compromised, Rivera faced the hardest decision of his military career. That's when she appeared. Through his night vision scope, Rivera spotted movement on the ridge above. A lone figure, moving with the fluid precision of a trained operator, but something was different. The silhouette was smaller, more graceful than any SEAL he'd ever seen. As the figure settled into a sniper position, Rivera realized what made this moment extraordinary. In a world where
Target
women
at
weren't
300,
supposed to
wind
exist
adjustment
in
made.
special operations,
Taking the
a female
shot!
sniper had
Hit,
just positioned
reloading.
herself between his dying
Second
team
shot
and certain
engaging!
annihilation.
Target down, hold position.
What happened next would rewrite everything the military thought they knew about women in combat, change the lives of 13 people forever, and prove that sometimes the most unlikely hero emerges from the shadows when hope seems lost. This is the true story of how one woman's deadly precision and unwavering courage saved an entire SEAL team, and how her actions would eventually transform military policy across the globe. But this story begins 3 years earlier, in a place where dreams go to die and legends are born. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez never planned to become a killer. Growing up in a small Texas border town where opportunities were as scarce as rain, she had dreamed of becoming a teacher. But, when her younger brother Miguel was killed by cartel violence just weeks before his high school graduation, something inside Elena hardened like steel in a forge. She walked into the Army recruitment office the next morning with tears still fresh on her cheeks and determination burning in her dark eyes. The recruiting sergeant, a weathered man named Thompson who had seen plenty of grief-motivated enlistees, tried to talk her out of it. He explained that the military wasn't about revenge, that healing couldn't come from a rifle. Elena listened politely, then signed her name with the same steady hand that would later place bullets exactly where they needed to go. She had found her calling, even if she didn't know it yet. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood was brutal, but Elena thrived in the structure and discipline. While other recruits complained about the early mornings and constant pressure, she found peace in the routine. Her drill sergeants noticed something special about the quiet girl from Texas. She never missed a target on the shooting range, never broke under pressure during training exercises, and never complained about anything. Other soldiers started calling her Ghost because she moved so silently through the barracks and training grounds. After basic training, Elena scored high enough on her tests to choose any military occupational specialty she wanted. Her superiors expected her to choose something traditional for women in the military, perhaps military police or intelligence. Instead, she requested infantry training with a specialization in marksmanship. The request raised eyebrows throughout the chain of command, but her scores were undeniable. Advanced individual training at Fort Benning was where Elena truly discovered her gift. On the sniper range, she consistently outshot men who had been hunting since childhood. Her instructor, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, was a veteran of 3 deployments who had trained dozens of snipers. He had never seen anything like Elena's natural ability to read wind, calculate distance, and control her breathing under pressure. Vasquez, Rodriguez told her after she had just placed 10 consecutive shots within a quarter-inch group at 800 yards, "You don't just shoot well. You shoot like the rifle is part of your body. That's not something you can teach." Elena's fellow trainees were initially skeptical of the small woman who rarely spoke unless spoken to. But, after she consistently outperformed everyone on the range, skepticism turned to respect. During a particularly challenging exercise involving moving targets in windy conditions, Elena made a shot that even Rodriguez called impossible. The target was 1,200 yards away, moving at approximately 15 miles per hour, with a crosswind gusting up to 20 miles per hour. Elena took nearly 3 minutes to line up her shot, accounting for variables that most snipers would consider too complex to calculate. When she fired, the bullet found its mark with surgical precision. "How did you make that shot?" asked Private Jackson, one of her classmates who would later become a close friend. Elena shrugged, a gesture that would become her trademark response to praise. "I just felt where the bullet needed to go," she said quietly. It was the closest she ever came to explaining her extraordinary ability. After completing sniper school with the highest scores in the program's history, Elena was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, Kansas. Her commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, was one of the first women to serve in a combat leadership role. Mitchell recognized something special in Elena and took her under her wing, providing mentorship that went beyond military training. Elena, Colonel Mitchell told her during one of their regular meetings, "You have a rare gift, but gifts mean nothing without wisdom. The most dangerous person on a battlefield isn't the one with the best aim, it's the one who knows when not to shoot." Elena absorbed these lessons while honing her skills on increasingly difficult training scenarios. She spent countless hours studying ballistics, meteorology, and human psychology. She learned to move through terrain without leaving a trace, to remain motionless for hours at a time, and to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. Her fellow soldiers began to understand that Elena wasn't just another sniper, she was something entirely different. During her first deployment to Iraq, Elena was assigned to a forward operating base near Fallujah. The region was experiencing increased insurgent activity, and American forces were taking casualties from enemy snipers who knew the terrain intimately. Elena's unit was tasked with providing overwatch protection for supply convoys traveling through particularly dangerous areas. Her first confirmed kill came on a dusty Tuesday morning in October. Intelligence had identified an enemy sniper who had been targeting American convoys from a minaret approximately 800 yards from the main supply route. Elena positioned herself on a rooftop before dawn, remaining motionless for over 6 hours while waiting for the target to appear. When he finally emerged, Elena had less than 3 seconds to identify the threat, calculate her shot, and neutralize the target before he could harm American soldiers. She took the shot without hesitation. The enemy sniper dropped immediately, his weapon clattering down the minaret stairs. Elena felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. She simply packed her equipment and prepared for the next mission. Her spotter, Corporal Davidson, was amazed by her emotional control. "Most people feel something after their first kill," Davidson told her as they prepared to leave their position. "You just look ready for the next target." "Feeling something won't bring back the soldiers he might have killed," Elena replied. "This isn't about feelings. It's about protecting our people." Over the next 8 months, Elena accumulated 17 confirmed kills, each one carefully documented and investigated according to military protocol. Her reputation began to spread throughout the theater of operations. Other units specifically requested her support for high-risk missions. Military brass began to take notice of the quiet sniper who seemed to make impossible shots look routine. But it was during a mission near Baghdad that Elena truly proved her exceptional value. A Marine unit had been pinned down by insurgents in an abandoned building complex. 3 Marines were wounded and unable to move, while enemy fighters prevented any rescue attempt. Elena was called in to provide support from a position nearly 1,400 yards away. The building complex was a maze of windows, doorways, and rooftops where enemy fighters could hide. Elena spent 2 hours studying the area through her scope, identifying 17 different positions where insurgents were located. Using a combination of direct shots and ricochets off concrete walls, she systematically eliminated threats while providing cover for the rescue team. The Marines were successfully extracted without additional casualties. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, who commanded the rescue operation, wrote in his report, "Staff Sergeant Vasquez demonstrated exceptional skill and judgment under extreme pressure." Her actions directly saved the lives of 3 Marines and enabled the successful extraction of an entire unit. Her performance exceeded every expectation and standard for sniper operations. Elena's success in Iraq caught the attention of special operations recruiters who were always looking for exceptional talent. She was approached by representatives from various elite units, but she declined all offers. She was content serving with regular infantry, protecting soldiers who reminded her of her younger brother Miguel. She wasn't interested in glory or special recognition, she simply wanted to keep good people alive. During her second deployment, this time to Afghanistan, Elena's reputation continued to grow. The mountainous terrain presented new challenges that required different skills than urban combat in Iraq. She learned to calculate shots at extreme elevation, to account for thinner air and unpredictable wind patterns. She studied the tactics of enemy fighters who knew the mountains intimately and used terrain to their advantage. It was in Afghanistan that Elena first encountered SEAL Team Alpha. They were operating in the same region as her unit, pursuing high-value targets that threatened coalition forces. Elena's commanding officer was asked to provide sniper support for one of their missions, and Elena was chosen for the assignment. Captain Marcus Rivera was initially skeptical about working with a regular army sniper, especially one who was still relatively young and inexperienced with special operations. But, after Elena successfully eliminated 3 threats during a complex night operation, Rivera gained newfound respect for her abilities. "I've worked with Delta Force snipers, Navy SEAL snipers, and Marine Scout snipers," Rivera told his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. "I've never seen anyone shoot like Vasquez. She doesn't just hit targets, she makes targets disappear." Elena's collaboration with SEAL Team Alpha was supposed to last only 1 week, but Rivera requested an extension. Then, another. Elena found herself working more frequently with special operations units who needed precise, reliable support for their high-risk missions. She began to understand the unique challenges faced by elite warriors operating behind enemy lines with minimal support. During a particularly dangerous mission to capture a Taliban leader, Elena provided overwatch from a mountain ridge while SEAL Team Alpha conducted the assault. When the mission went sideways and the team found themselves surrounded, Elena's precision shooting created an escape route that saved 13 lives. Her actions that night earned her a Bronze Star Medal, though she never wore it on her uniform. As Elena's 3rd year in the Army drew to a close, she faced a decision about her future. Multiple special operations units had made formal requests to recruit her, offering advanced training and opportunities that most soldiers could only dream of. She was also being considered for Ranger School, which had recently opened to women on an experimental basis. But Elena had a different plan forming in her mind. She had spent 3 years learning conventional military tactics and procedures. She understood how regular soldiers operated, how they thought, and what they needed to survive in combat. She also had extensive experience working with special operations units who operated by different rules and faced different challenges. Elena realized that her unique combination of skills and experience could be valuable in ways that traditional military structures couldn't fully utilize. She began to envision operations where she could work independently, providing support for special operations teams while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing situations. It was an unconventional idea that challenged traditional military hierarchy, but Elena had never been concerned with convention. The opportunity to test her theory would come sooner than she expected. Intelligence agencies had identified a Taliban leader who was planning attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The target was located in extremely hostile territory where conventional forces couldn't operate effectively. Special operations teams needed support, but the mission profile didn't fit standard operational parameters. Elena volunteered for the mission, proposing an operational plan that would allow her to work independently while providing critical support for SEAL Team Alpha. Her commanding officer was reluctant to approve such an unconventional approach, but Elena's track record spoke for itself. After consultation with higher headquarters, the mission was approved. Elena began preparing for what would become the most important operation of her military career. She spent weeks studying satellite imagery, weather patterns, and intelligence reports about enemy activity in the target area. She planned multiple routes, contingency positions, and escape plans. Every detail was carefully considered and rehearsed. As she prepared her equipment for the mission, Elena reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. 3 years earlier, she had been a grieving sister seeking purpose and meaning after senseless tragedy. Now she was one of the most skilled snipers in the United States military, preparing for a mission that would test every skill she had developed. Elena packed her rifle with the same care and precision that characterized everything she did. She had modified the weapon extensively, customizing every component to match her specifications. The rifle had become an extension of her will, a tool through which she could project protection and precision across impossible distances. Tomorrow, she would discover just how far that protection could reach. The helicopter carrying SEAL Team Alpha disappeared into the Afghan mountains at 0347 hours on a moonless October morning. Captain Marcus Rivera watched the landscape below through night vision goggles, noting the jagged peaks and deep valleys that would make this mission unlike any other he had commanded. Intelligence had located Hashim al-Rashid, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed over 60 coalition personnel in the past 6 months. The target was hiding in a compound nestled between two mountain peaks, accessible only by treacherous footpaths that local fighters had used for generations. Rivera's team consisted of 12 elite operators, each selected for specific skills needed for this high-altitude operation. They were some of the most experienced special operations personnel in the military, veterans of countless missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. But even they felt the weight of this assignment. The compound was located in territory so hostile that conventional forces avoided the entire region. Support would be minimal, extraction uncertain, and enemy strength unknown. What made this mission particularly challenging was its complexity. Intelligence indicated that al-Rashid was planning to leave the compound within 48 hours to attend a meeting with other Taliban leaders. This meeting would finalize plans for a series of coordinated attacks targeting coalition bases across 3 provinces. The window for capturing or killing al-Rashid was narrow, and failure would likely result in hundreds of casualties. As the helicopter approached the landing zone, Rivera reviewed the mission parameters one final time. The team would insert under cover of darkness, move through mountainous terrain to reach observation positions overlooking the target compound, conduct surveillance to confirm al-Rashid's presence, and then execute a direct assault to capture or kill the target. Extraction would occur at a secondary landing zone 6 miles from the compound, requiring a dangerous movement through enemy territory after the mission was complete. The helicopter flared for landing on a narrow ridge barely wide enough for the aircraft's rotors. Rivera's team quickly unloaded their equipment and moved away from the landing zone as the helicopter disappeared back into the darkness. They were now alone in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth, carrying everything they would need to survive and complete their mission. The team moved through the mountains with practiced silence, using night vision equipment to navigate terrain that would be treacherous even in daylight. Rivera led from the front, setting a pace that balanced speed with stealth. Every step had to be carefully placed to avoid loose rocks that could alert enemy sentries. The altitude made breathing difficult, and the cold mountain air cut through their equipment like a knife. After 3 hours of movement, the team reached their first checkpoint, a rocky outcrop that provided cover and concealment while they assessed their progress. Rivera gathered his team leaders for a quick briefing, reviewing their route and timeline. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but Rivera felt the familiar tension that preceded high-risk operations. Years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this mission felt different. "Sir," whispered Petty Officer First Class Thompson, the team's communications specialist, "I'm getting intermittent chatter on enemy frequencies. Sounds like they have patrols in this area." Rivera nodded grimly. Intelligence had suggested possible enemy presence, but the mountains made communication intercepts unreliable. The team would have to assume they were being hunted while continuing toward their objective. Rivera signaled for the team to continue movement, adjusting their route to avoid areas where enemy patrols might be operating. As dawn approached, Rivera's team reached their hide site, a cluster of boulders that provided concealment while offering clear observation of the target compound 2 miles away. The compound was larger than intelligence reports had indicated, consisting of multiple buildings surrounded by defensive walls. Through high-powered scopes, the team could see armed guards patrolling the perimeter and additional security positions on nearby ridges. "This is going to be tougher than we thought," Rivera told his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, as they studied the target through their scopes. "That compound has at least 20 fighters that we can see, probably more inside the buildings. And those security positions on the ridges give them overlapping fields of fire covering all approach routes." Chen nodded as she analyzed the defensive positions. She was one of the most experienced special operations officers in the Navy, with over 15 years of service and dozens of successful missions. But even she was concerned about the tactical situation they faced. "We need more intelligence about their strength and disposition before we can plan an assault," she said quietly. For the next 18 hours, Rivera's team conducted detailed surveillance of the compound, documenting guard rotations, defensive positions, and patterns of activity. They confirmed that al-Rashid was present in the compound, identifying him through high-resolution photographic equipment during one of his brief appearances in the courtyard. The target was there, but reaching him would require overcoming significant defensive obstacles. As evening approached on their second day in position, Rivera received an encrypted communication from headquarters providing updated intelligence about enemy activity in the region. The news was troubling. Communications intercepts indicated that Taliban forces were aware of American special operations activity in the area and were mobilizing additional fighters to search for Rivera's team. The net was closing around them. "We need to accelerate our timeline," Rivera told Chen during their evening planning session. "If we wait much longer, we're going to have half the Taliban in Afghanistan looking for us." Chen agreed, but pointed out the tactical challenges they still faced. "The compound is too well defended for a direct assault with 12 operators. We need some kind of advantage to even the odds." Rivera had been thinking the same thing. Standard special operations tactics called for overwhelming superiority of numbers or firepower when conducting direct assaults. Neither was available for this mission. What they needed was a force multiplier, something that could neutralize multiple threats simultaneously while allowing the assault team to close with the objective. That's when Rivera remembered Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, the Army sniper who had provided support for previous operations. Her precision shooting and ability to operate independently in hostile territory made her exactly the kind of asset they needed. Rivera contacted headquarters requesting immediate support from Vasquez, but was told she was already deployed elsewhere in the theater. Unknown to Rivera, Elena was actually operating alone in the same mountain range, conducting her own mission to gather intelligence about Taliban supply routes. She had been inserted 3 days earlier at a location 15 miles from Rivera's position, tasked with observing and documenting enemy logistical operations that supported terrorist activities throughout the region. Elena had established her observation post on a mountain peak that provided commanding views of multiple valleys used by Taliban supply convoys. For 3 days, she had documented vehicle movements, personnel transfers, and cargo shipments that would later be targeted by coalition airstrikes. Her position was so well concealed that enemy patrols had passed within 100 yards of her location without detecting her presence. On the same evening that Rivera was planning his assault, Elena intercepted radio communications indicating that SEAL Team Alpha was operating somewhere in the area and was facing significant enemy opposition. Military protocol required her to report this information to her superiors, but it would take hours for any support to be coordinated and deployed. By then, Rivera's team might be dead or captured. Elena faced a decision that would define her military career and possibly save the lives of 13 elite warriors. She could follow protocol, report the intelligence, and continue her assigned mission while hoping that help would arrive in time for Rivera's team. Or she could abandon her position, move through hostile territory, and attempt to provide support based on incomplete information and her own tactical judgment. Elena made her decision with the same calm certainty that characterized all of her actions. She carefully packed her equipment, erased all traces of her presence at the observation post, and began moving toward the coordinates where she estimated Rivera's team was operating. The journey would take her through some of the most dangerous terrain in Afghanistan, moving alone at night through mountains controlled by enemy forces. As Elena moved through the darkness, Rivera's team was finalizing their assault plan. They had identified a window of opportunity during the early morning hours when guard rotations created a brief gap in defensive coverage. The plan was ambitious and dangerous, requiring perfect timing and coordination. Any mistake could result in the entire team being killed or captured. "Listen up," Rivera told his team during their final briefing. "We have one chance to get this right. Once we start the assault, there's no going back. Everyone needs to be perfect, because perfect is the only thing that's going to get us home." The team prepared their equipment with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, ammunition, and communication gear. Each operator carried specific tools for their role in the assault, from breaching charges to medical supplies. They were as ready as training and experience could make them, but Rivera couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something critical. At 0200 hours, Rivera's team began their final approach to the compound. They moved in two elements, with Rivera leading the primary assault team while Chen commanded the support element that would provide covering fire. The mountain air was bitterly cold, and their breath created small clouds that could potentially give away their position to alert sentries. Everything went wrong simultaneously. As Rivera's assault element reached the outer wall of the compound, hidden sensors triggered alarm systems that brought the entire facility to immediate alert. Floodlights illuminated the compound while armed fighters rushed to defensive positions. The element of surprise was completely lost. "Contact front," shouted Petty Officer Martinez as enemy fighters opened fire from multiple positions. Rivera's team took cover behind a low stone wall, but they were exposed to fire from at least 3 different directions. The tactical situation had become desperate in less than 30 seconds. Chen's support element attempted to provide covering fire, but the enemy positions were too well protected by stone walls and concrete barriers. Her team's weapons couldn't generate enough firepower to suppress all of the enemy fighters who were now engaging Rivera's assault element. "Alpha 6, this is Alpha 7, Chen called over the radio. "We need to abort. The assault element is taking too much fire to advance or retreat." Rivera assessed their situation while bullets cracked overhead. His team was pinned down with limited cover and no clear escape route. Enemy fighters were moving to flank their position while others called for reinforcements. In a few minutes, they would be completely surrounded with no hope of extraction. "Negative on abort," Rivera responded. "We can't move without taking casualties. We need to hold this position and call for air support." But Rivera knew that air support was hours away, and his team didn't have hours. They had maybe 20 minutes before being overrun by superior numbers. He had led his team into an impossible situation, and traditional tactics weren't going to save them. That's when Elena Vesquez appeared on the ridge above the compound, exactly where she needed to be at precisely the right moment. She had covered 15 miles of hostile mountain terrain in 6 hours, moving with the silence and precision that had earned her the nickname Ghost. She quickly assessed the tactical situation and realized that Rivera's team was facing annihilation unless something dramatic happened immediately. Elena settled into a firing position among the rocks, her rifle steady despite having just completed an exhausting movement through treacherous terrain. She could see enemy fighters moving to surround Rivera's position while others prepared to launch a coordinated assault that would finish the trapped SEAL team. Through her scope, Elena counted at least 30 enemy fighters in positions that threatened Rivera's team. The range was extreme, over 1,200 yards, with unpredictable mountain winds and poor lighting conditions. Most snipers would consider it an impossible shot under ideal circumstances, let alone during the chaos of a firefight. But Elena had never operated under ideal circumstances, and impossible shots had become her specialty. She began with the most dangerous targets, enemy fighters who were in position to immediately threaten Rivera's team. Her first shot removed a machine gunner who had been preparing to fire into Rivera's position. Her second shot eliminated a fighter who was moving with an rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Each shot was calculated with mathematical precision, accounting for wind, distance, and target movement. Rivera's team suddenly noticed that enemy fire was decreasing and that threats were being neutralized by an unknown sniper. Rivera realized that someone was providing support from an elevated position, but he had no idea who was shooting or where the shots were coming from. "Alpha 6, we've got someone providing sniper support," reported Petty Officer Thompson. "Unknown shooter is engaging enemy positions from the high ground." Rivera couldn't spare time to wonder about their mysterious benefactor. The sudden reduction in enemy fire had created an opportunity to move, and he intended to take advantage of it immediately. "All Alpha elements, prepare to bound to the secondary rally point," Rivera commanded. "Move on my signal." As Rivera's team prepared to move, Elena continued her systematic elimination of enemy threats. Her shots were so precisely placed that enemy fighters began to panic, unsure where the deadly fire was coming from. Some abandoned their positions to seek better cover, while others returned fire blindly toward the ridgeline where Elena was concealed. The chaos created by Elena's intervention gave Rivera's team the opportunity they needed to begin their withdrawal from the compound area. But their ordeal was far from over. Enemy reinforcements were converging on their position, and the journey to their extraction point would take them through terrain controlled by hostile forces who now knew exactly where to find them. Elena Vasquez watched through her scope as SEAL Team Alpha began their desperate retreat from the compound. She had bought them time with her precision shooting, but the tactical situation remained critical. Enemy reinforcements were arriving faster than she had anticipated, and Rivera's team would soon face overwhelming numbers during their movement to the extraction point. Elena realized that her intervention had only delayed their destruction, not prevented it. From her elevated position, Elena could see what Rivera's team couldn't. Taliban fighters were moving through the valleys to establish blocking positions along every possible route to the extraction zone. Radio communications indicated that over 200 enemy personnel were converging on the area, including fighters with heavy weapons and intimate knowledge of the local terrain. Rivera's 12-man team was walking into a carefully planned ambush that would be impossible to survive using conventional tactics. Elena faced another critical decision. Her original mission required her to maintain position and continue gathering intelligence about enemy supply operations. Military protocol dictated that she should report the situation to higher headquarters and allow them to coordinate appropriate support for Rivera's team. But Elena had learned to trust her tactical instincts, and those instincts told her that Rivera's team would be dead before help could arrive through normal channels. She made her choice with characteristic decisiveness. Elena began moving along the ridgeline, using her knowledge of mountain warfare to stay ahead of Rivera's team while maintaining overwatch positions that allowed her to engage threats before they could attack the SEALs. It was an unconventional approach that violated standard operating procedures, but Elena had never been concerned with conventional approaches when lives were at stake. Rivera's team moved through the darkness with tactical precision, but they were operating in enemy territory where every shadow could hide a threat. The rocky terrain made silent movement nearly impossible, and their equipment created subtle sounds that experienced fighters could detect. Rivera knew they were being hunted by forces that knew the mountains intimately and had every advantage except superior training and equipment. Alpha 6, we have movement to our front, reported Petty Officer Jackson, who was serving as point man for the team's movement. Looks like a patrol, maybe 6 personnel, moving to intercept our route. Rivera signaled for the team to take cover while he assessed the situation. Through his night vision scope, he could see the enemy patrol moving with confidence through terrain that favored defenders. The patrol was positioned to detect any movement toward the extraction zone, and engaging them would reveal the team's location to other enemy forces in the area. Before Rivera could formulate a response, Elena's rifle spoke from the ridgeline above. 6 precisely placed shots eliminated the entire enemy patrol in less than 10 seconds. The shots were so perfectly timed and placed that the patrol members had no opportunity to alert other forces or return fire. They simply disappeared from the tactical equation as if they had never existed. Rivera realized that his team had acquired a guardian angel, someone with extraordinary shooting skills who was providing overwatch protection during their movement. He didn't know who was providing this support, but he was grateful for any advantage in their desperate situation. Unknown sniper, this is Alpha 6, Rivera transmitted on emergency frequencies. If you can hear this transmission, we are moving to Extraction Zone Charlie. Request continued support. Elena heard the transmission but couldn't respond without revealing her position to enemy radio direction finding equipment. Instead, she continued moving along the ridgeline, staying parallel to Rivera's route while scanning for additional threats. Her movement through the mountains was a masterclass in individual tactical skills, utilizing terrain and natural concealment to remain invisible while covering over 3 miles of hostile territory. 20 minutes later, Rivera's team encountered their next obstacle. A Taliban blocking position had been established at a narrow pass that represented the only feasible route toward the extraction zone. The position was expertly sited, utilizing natural terrain features to create overlapping fields of fire while providing excellent protection for the defenders. Rivera counted at least 15 enemy fighters with automatic weapons and at least 1 heavy machine gun. Alpha 7, this is Alpha 6, Rivera radioed to Chen's element. We have a significant blocking position to our front. Recommend we find an alternate route. Chen studied their tactical map while enemy fighters continued to strengthen their defensive positions. Alpha 6, there is no alternate route that doesn't add 4 hours to our movement time. We don't have 4 hours before enemy reinforcements make movement impossible. Rivera knew Chen was right, but he also knew that attacking the blocking position would likely result in heavy casualties for his team. The enemy fighters were well positioned and had superior numbers. A direct assault would be costly even under ideal circumstances, and their current situation was far from ideal. Elena observed the blocking position through her scope and immediately understood the tactical challenge it represented. The position was too strong to be eliminated by conventional small unit tactics, but it was perfectly positioned for engagement by a precision marksman with elevation advantage. The enemy fighters were exposed to observation and fire from the ridgeline where Elena was positioned. She began her work with methodical precision, targeting key personnel and weapons systems in a sequence designed to create maximum confusion while eliminating the most dangerous threats. Her first target was the heavy machine gun crew, whose weapon posed the greatest threat to Rivera's team. Her second target was the position commander, whose elimination would disrupt enemy coordination. Subsequent targets were selected based on their tactical importance and accessibility. Elena's shooting was so accurate and rapid that enemy fighters initially thought they were being attacked by multiple snipers from different positions. Panic spread through the blocking position as fighters abandoned their carefully prepared defensive positions to seek cover from the precise fire that seemed to find them regardless of their location. Within 5 minutes, Elena had eliminated 11 enemy fighters and neutralized the heavy machine gun that anchored the defensive position. The surviving enemy personnel withdrew from the pass, abandoning equipment and weapons in their haste to escape the deadly accurate fire from the ridgeline. Rivera watched in amazement as the blocking position simply disintegrated under precision fire from their mysterious benefactor. One moment his team faced an impossible tactical situation, and the next moment their route to the extraction zone was clear. Rivera had never seen anything like the shooting exhibition he was witnessing. All Alpha elements, move through the pass immediately, Rivera commanded. Unknown sniper has cleared our route. We need to take advantage while we can. As Rivera's team moved through the abandoned enemy positions, they discovered weapons and equipment that confirmed the sophistication of the force they were facing. The Taliban fighters were well equipped with modern weapons and communication gear, suggesting significant support from external sources. Rivera realized that his team had stumbled into something much larger than a simple capture mission. Elena continued her Overwatch mission, moving to new positions that allowed her to monitor potential threat areas along Rivera's route. She had been operating at maximum intensity for over 6 hours, covering nearly 20 miles of mountainous terrain while engaging multiple enemy targets under extremely challenging conditions. Her physical and mental stamina were being tested to their limits, but she maintained focus on her primary mission of keeping Rivera's team alive. The next threat materialized as Rivera's team approached the final valley before their extraction zone. Intelligence reports had suggested minimal enemy presence in this area, but Elena could see through her scope that at least 30 Taliban fighters were establishing an ambush position that would place Rivera's team in a deadly crossfire. The enemy had anticipated the SEAL team's route and prepared a trap that would be difficult to escape once triggered. Elena faced her most challenging tactical problem yet. The enemy ambush position was spread over several hundred yards of rocky terrain, with fighters positioned in caves and behind boulders that provided excellent protection. The range was extreme, over 1,400 yards, with variable wind conditions and challenging light as dawn began to break over the mountains. Eliminating all threats would require shooting at the very limits of her equipment and skill. She began with the most dangerous positions, targeting machine gun crews and rocket-propelled grenade teams that could inflict immediate casualties on Rivera's team. Each shot required careful calculation of range, wind, and target exposure time. Elena had to account for the increasing light that was changing visibility conditions while working within a time limit imposed by Rivera's continuing movement toward the ambush. As Elena engaged the ambush position, enemy fighters began to realize they were facing a single sniper with extraordinary capabilities. Some fighters abandoned their positions to seek better cover, while others attempted to locate Elena's position through careful observation of her muzzle flashes. The psychological pressure created by Elena's accurate fire was as important as the physical casualties she inflicted. Rivera's team detected the enemy ambush position through their own observation and immediately took cover while assessing the threat. Rivera could see muzzle flashes from the ridgeline where their guardian angel was engaging enemy positions, but he could also see that the enemy force was large and well positioned. Alpha 7, we have another blocking position to our front, Rivera reported to Chen. Looks like a company-sized element in prepared positions. Our sniper support is engaging, but we may need to find another route. Chen studied the terrain through her binoculars and realized that there were no other viable routes to the extraction zone. Alpha 6, this is our only option. If we go around, we'll miss our extraction window and be stuck in hostile territory with no support. Rivera knew Chen was right, but he also knew that attacking a company-sized enemy force with 12 operators would be suicidal. Their only hope was that their mysterious sniper could neutralize enough threats to create a window for movement. Rivera had never placed such complete reliance on a single individual, but circumstances had left him with no other option. Elena continued her systematic engagement of enemy positions, working methodically through targets of opportunity while conserving ammunition for critical shots. She had been carrying limited ammunition because her original mission was intelligence gathering, not sustained combat. Every shot had to count because resupply was impossible in her current situation. As the morning light continued to improve, Elena's shooting became even more accurate. She could now clearly identify individual targets and make precise shots that eliminated key personnel while minimizing ammunition expenditure. Her reputation as an exceptional marksman was being validated under the most challenging conditions possible. After 30 minutes of sustained engagement, Elena had neutralized enough of the ambush force to create an opportunity for Rivera's team. The remaining enemy fighters were scattered and demoralized, unable to maintain the coordinated defense that had originally threatened the SEAL team. Rivera recognized the opportunity and immediately began moving his team through the valley toward their extraction zone. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that their guardian angel had given them a precious gift that couldn't be wasted. Every minute brought them closer to safety and farther from the overwhelming enemy forces that were still searching for them throughout the mountains. As Rivera's team reached the extraction zone, Elena faced her own tactical challenge. She had expended most of her ammunition and was still deep in hostile territory with enemy forces actively searching for the sniper who had caused so much damage. Her mission was complete in terms of supporting Rivera's team, but her own survival was now uncertain. Elena began her own movement toward a secondary extraction point that had been established for her original mission. The journey would take her through territory that was now flooded with angry Taliban fighters seeking revenge for their casualties. She would have to use every skill she had developed over 3 years of combat operations to reach safety. But, first, Elena allowed herself one moment of satisfaction as she watched Rivera's team board their extraction helicopter. 13 elite warriors were alive because she had chosen to abandon protocol and follow her tactical instincts. In the mountains of Afghanistan, where death was always watching, Elena Vasquez had proven that sometimes one person with courage and skill could change the outcome of an entire operation. Elena Vasquez watched the extraction helicopter disappear into the dawn sky, carrying SEAL Team Alpha to safety. She had accomplished something extraordinary, but her own situation had become desperate. Taliban forces throughout the region were now actively hunting for the sniper who had inflicted devastating casualties on their fighters. Radio communications indicated that over 300 enemy personnel were involved in the search, including experienced trackers who knew every trail and hiding place in the mountains. Elena faced a tactical problem that would test every survival skill she had developed during 3 years of combat operations. She was alone in hostile territory with limited ammunition, no support, and enemy forces closing in from multiple directions. Her original extraction point was now compromised, surrounded by Taliban fighters who had correctly anticipated that the mysterious sniper would attempt to reach that location. The nearest friendly forces were over 40 miles away across terrain that was completely controlled by the enemy. Elena would have to move through valleys and mountain passes where Taliban patrols were actively searching for her while avoiding populated areas where local fighters could identify and report her position. It was a journey that would require perfect execution over several days with no room for error. Elena began her movement by carefully erasing all evidence of her presence at the ridgeline position where she had engaged enemy forces. She policed her brass, covered disturbed earth, and arranged natural materials to disguise her former firing positions. Experience had taught her that skilled trackers could follow signs that most people would never notice, and the Taliban fighters hunting her included some of the best trackers in Afghanistan. Her first challenge was crossing the valley floor where Rivera's team had been extracted. Taliban fighters were converging on that area from multiple directions, searching for any clues that might lead them to the sniper. Elena studied their movement patterns through her scope, identifying gaps in their search that might allow her to pass undetected. She waited until midday when the intense heat would make tracking more difficult and enemy fighters would be seeking shade rather than actively patrolling. Elena moved across the valley floor using natural terrain features for concealment, staying in dry streambeds and rocky areas that wouldn't retain footprints. Her movement was so careful and deliberate that it took her 3 hours to cover 2 miles. Once across the valley, Elena faced the challenge of climbing into the mountain range that separated her from friendly territory. The route would take her through several passes that were traditionally used by local smugglers and fighters. Taliban forces would certainly establish checkpoints at these locations, making passage extremely dangerous for someone traveling alone. Elena studied her tactical map and identified an alternative route that avoided the traditional passes. The route was longer and more physically demanding, requiring her to climb over terrain that was rarely traveled even by local inhabitants. But the difficult terrain would also make it unlikely that enemy forces would establish patrols in those areas. As Elena began her climb into the higher elevations, she intercepted radio communications that revealed the full scope of the search operation being conducted against her. Taliban commanders had issued standing orders that the sniper responsible for the previous night's casualties was to be captured alive if possible. They wanted to interrogate her about American Special Operations activities and use her for propaganda purposes. The radio traffic also revealed that Taliban forces had correctly identified her as a female sniper, information that increased their determination to capture rather than kill her. Elena realized that her gender had become both an additional danger and a potential advantage. Enemy forces would be expecting to capture a woman, which might make them less cautious about the lethal capabilities she still possessed. Elena's climb through the high mountains was grueling, requiring her to navigate rocky terrain while carrying full equipment at altitudes that made breathing difficult. She moved primarily during daylight hours when she could see potential threats, hiding in carefully selected positions during darkness when enemy patrols were most active. Her progress was slow but steady, covering 8 to 10 miles each day while avoiding detection. On her second day of movement, Elena encountered her first direct threat since leaving the ridgeline. A Taliban patrol consisting of 6 fighters was moving through the same mountain area where she had chosen to rest during the afternoon heat. The patrol was conducting a systematic search, checking caves and rocky outcrops where a sniper might hide. Elena observed the patrol from a concealed position among the rocks, evaluating her options. She could attempt to avoid detection by remaining hidden, but the patrol's search pattern was thorough and would likely discover her position. She could engage the patrol with her remaining ammunition, but gunfire would alert other enemy forces in the area to her location. Neither option offered guaranteed success. Elena chose a third alternative that required precise timing and nerves of steel. She waited until the patrol was moving through a narrow rocky passage where their movement was restricted and visibility was limited. Using her intimate knowledge of mountain terrain, she triggered a small rockslide that blocked the passage and separated the patrol into 2 groups. The confused Taliban fighters assumed that the rockslide was natural, a common occurrence in the unstable mountain terrain. While they worked to clear the passage and reunite their patrol, Elena moved through their former search area and continued her journey toward friendly territory. She had neutralized a significant threat without firing a shot or revealing her presence. Elena's tactical success was noticed by Taliban commanders who were monitoring radio communications from the search patrols. They realized that the sniper they were hunting possessed exceptional field skills beyond just marksmanship. Orders were issued to increase the number of patrols and reduce the spacing between search teams to prevent similar incidents. By her third day of movement, Elena was operating in mountainous terrain that was familiar to local Taliban fighters but rarely traveled by outsiders. The enemy had established observation posts on prominent peaks that provided visual coverage of major movement routes. Elena was forced to travel during periods of limited visibility and use microterrain features to avoid detection by observers who knew the mountains intimately. Elena's physical condition was beginning to show the effects of 3 days of continuous movement through challenging terrain with minimal food and water. She had been carrying only enough supplies for her original intelligence mission, and those supplies were nearly exhausted. She would soon face the additional challenge of finding water and food in hostile territory where any contact with local populations would likely result in her capture. The solution came from Elena's extensive study of the local area during her mission planning. She had identified several locations where natural springs provided water sources that were not regularly visited by local inhabitants. These springs were often located in areas that were difficult to access and offered natural concealment from observation. Elena reached one of these springs on her 4th day of movement, allowing her to replenish her water supply and rest in a position that offered excellent security. The spring was located in a narrow canyon that could only be accessed from one direction, making it easy to defend while providing multiple escape routes if necessary. While resting at the spring, Elena monitored enemy radio communications and realized that the search operation was expanding beyond the immediate area where she had supported Rivera's team. Taliban commanders were now treating her pursuit as a high-priority operation, diverting resources from other activities to capture the sniper who had embarrassed their forces. The radio traffic revealed that Elena's actions had caused much more than tactical casualties. She had damaged the reputation and credibility of local Taliban leaders who had promised their superiors that the mountains were secure from American special operations. Her success had created political pressure within Taliban leadership that was driving the intense search operation. Elena also learned that Taliban forces had correctly identified her approximate direction of travel and were establishing blocking positions along routes leading to friendly territory. They were systematically closing escape routes while expanding their search to force her into areas where capture would be more likely. On her 5th day of movement, Elena encountered the most dangerous situation since beginning her escape. Taliban forces had established a checkpoint at a mountain pass that represented the only feasible route toward friendly territory. The checkpoint consisted of approximately 20 fighters with heavy weapons, positioned to observe and control all movement through the pass. Elena spent an entire day observing the checkpoint through her scope, studying guard rotations and defensive positions. The Taliban fighters were experienced and disciplined, maintaining proper security procedures while systematically searching all travelers attempting to pass through their position. Elena realized that avoiding the checkpoint would require a detour that would add days to her journey and might not be physically possible given her current condition and supply situation. Elena developed a plan that combined deception, precise timing, and her remaining ammunition to neutralize the checkpoint while creating confusion about her actual location and direction of travel. The plan was extremely risky and would require perfect execution, but it offered the best chance of reaching friendly territory before her physical condition deteriorated further. Elena positioned herself on a ridge approximately 800 yards from the checkpoint, selecting a firing position that offered multiple escape routes while providing clear observation of enemy positions. She waited until evening when changing light conditions would make it difficult for enemy forces to locate her position after she began shooting. Her attack on the checkpoint was swift and devastating. Elena used her remaining ammunition to eliminate key personnel and weapons systems while creating the impression that the attack was coming from multiple directions. The confused Taliban fighters returned fire towards several different areas, unable to identify her actual position among the rocks and shadows of the mountain ridgeline. The psychological impact of Elena's attack was as important as the physical casualties she inflicted. Taliban fighters at the checkpoint had heard stories about the mysterious sniper who had caused massive casualties during the previous week. When they came under precise fire from an unidentifiable location, many fighters abandoned their positions and fled toward the rear. Within 15 minutes, Elena had neutralized the checkpoint and created an opportunity to pass through the mountain pass. But she had also exhausted her ammunition supply and alerted every enemy force in the area to her approximate location. She would have to complete the final portion of her journey without the protection that her rifle had provided. Elena moved through the abandoned checkpoint position, recovering weapons and ammunition from casualties while avoiding booby traps that retreating fighters might have left behind. she selected equipment that would be useful for the remainder of her journey while maintaining mobility and stealth. As Elena continued her movement toward friendly territory, Taliban commanders were coordinating a massive search operation designed to prevent her escape. They had correctly identified the general area where she was operating and were flooding that region with patrols and observation posts. Elena was approaching the most dangerous phase of her journey, where hundreds of enemy fighters were specifically looking for one woman who had become a symbol of American special operations capabilities. But Elena had one advantage that her pursuers couldn't anticipate. During her 3 years of combat operations, she had developed relationships with local inhabitants who were opposed to Taliban rule. These relationships were carefully cultivated and maintained through her respectful treatment of civilians and her reputation for protecting innocent people from terrorist activities. Elena was about to discover that her reputation had spread further than she realized, and that help would come from sources that Taliban commanders never suspected. Her final escape from the mountains would depend not just on her military skills, but on the human connections she had built during years of serving with honor and distinction in a complex and dangerous environment. Elena Vasquez reached the outskirts of the small village of Deir Souf on her 6th day of movement through hostile territory. She was exhausted, running low on water, and facing the final and most dangerous phase of her escape. Taliban forces had established checkpoints on all major routes leading to coalition territory, and their search patrols were systematically sweeping areas where she might be hiding. Elena needed help, but asking for assistance from local civilians could result in their deaths if Taliban forces discovered their cooperation. As Elena observed the village from a concealed position, she noticed movement that suggested the presence of Taliban fighters within the community. Her trained eye detected armed personnel who were positioned to observe approaches to the village while maintaining concealment among the civilian population. Elena realized that Deir Souf had been occupied by enemy forces who were using it as a base for search operations. Elena was studying the tactical situation when she heard a quiet voice speaking in accented English from behind her position. "American soldier, you must come with me quickly. Taliban fighters are everywhere, and they will find you soon if you remain here." Elena spun around to find an elderly Afghan man standing among the rocks, somehow having approached her position without making any sound. Her hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, but something in the man's manner suggested that he meant no harm. He was unarmed and wore the simple clothing of a local farmer, but his eyes held the intelligence and caution of someone who had survived decades of war. "Who are you?" Elena asked quietly, keeping her weapon ready while assessing the potential threat. "My name is Ahmad Shah Massoud," the old man replied. "Not the famous commander, but his cousin. I have been watching for you since yesterday. My nephew serves as interpreter for your forces at Bugram airfield. He told me to watch for a woman soldier who might need assistance reaching safety." Elena studied Ahmad's face and demeanor, looking for signs of deception or threat. Her survival depended on making correct judgments about people, and 3 years of combat experience had taught her to read subtle indicators of truth or falsehood. Everything about Ahmad suggested sincerity, but Elena had also learned that Taliban forces sometimes used local civilians as unwilling agents. "How do I know you're not working with the Taliban?" Elena asked. Ahmad smiled sadly and pulled back his left sleeve, revealing scars from old bullet wounds. "Taliban fighters killed my son 2 years ago because he worked with your forces as a guide. They said he was a traitor to Islam for helping Americans. I would rather die than help the people who murdered my child." Elena saw truth in Ahmad's eyes and made the decision to trust him. She had reached the point where her chances of survival were better with local assistance than attempting to continue alone. Ahmad gestured for her to follow him as he began moving through terrain that offered concealment from observation. "There is a safe place where you can rest," Ahmad explained as they moved. "My brother has a compound outside the village where Taliban fighters do not patrol. We can hide you there while making arrangements for your extraction." Elena followed Ahmad through terrain that he knew intimately, using paths and routes that avoided areas where enemy patrols operated. His knowledge of local conditions was extensive, accumulated through decades of living in mountains where survival required understanding every rock and trail. Elena realized that Ahmad represented her best hope of reaching friendly territory alive. Ahmad's brother's compound was a traditional Afghan family dwelling built into the mountainside, designed to blend with natural terrain while providing security for its inhabitants. The compound housed 3 families totaling 15 people, including children ranging in age from 6 to 16 years old. Elena felt uncomfortable placing so many innocent people at risk, but Ahmad assured her that his family was committed to helping American forces. "These children have seen enough war," Ahmad's brother, Farid, explained through simple English supplemented by hand gestures. "We help American soldiers because Americans try to bring peace. Taliban brings only death and fear." Elena was provided with traditional Afghan women's clothing that would allow her to move through the area without attracting attention from Taliban patrols. The disguise was simple but effective, transforming her appearance from that of an American soldier to a local woman traveling with family members. Elena practiced walking and moving in the traditional garments while learning basic phrases in Dari that might be useful if questioned by enemy forces. While Elena recovered her strength at the compound, Ahmad was coordinating with a network of local inhabitants who were opposed to Taliban rule. This network had developed over years of occupation and included farmers, traders, and others who risked their lives to provide intelligence and assistance to coalition forces. Elena learned that her reputation as a soldier who protected civilians had spread throughout the local community, earning respect that now translated into active support for her escape. "Many people know about the woman sniper who saves American soldiers," Farid explained. "They say you never hurt civilians, that you only shoot bad men who kill innocent people. This is why families will help you reach safety." Elena was moved by the realization that her actions during 3 years of combat operations had created relationships and reputation that were now saving her life. She had always tried to conduct herself with honor and respect for local populations, but she had never understood the full impact of those decisions until facing her current desperate situation. On Elena's second day at the compound, Ahmad reported that he had made contact with coalition forces and arranged for an extraction operation. American Special Operations units had been conducting search operations for Elena since she had failed to report at her scheduled extraction point. Her absence had triggered significant concern at higher headquarters, who understood the potential intelligence compromise if she were captured. The extraction plan was complex and dangerous, requiring Elena to reach a designated landing zone while coalition forces conducted diversionary operations to distract Taliban attention. The landing zone was located 8 miles from the compound, requiring movement through territory where enemy patrols were actively searching for her. Ahmad's network would provide guides and support, but the final approach to the extraction point would be extremely hazardous. Elena spent her final day at the compound helping Farid's family with farm work while learning more about their experiences during years of war and occupation. She was particularly moved by conversations with the children, who spoke matter-of-factly about violence and danger that would traumatize children in peaceful societies. Elena realized that her military service was part of a larger effort to create conditions where these children might have normal lives. As evening approached, Elena prepared to begin her final journey to the extraction point. She had been provided with additional clothing and supplies by Ahmad's family, who insisted that she accept gifts despite their own limited resources. Elena was overwhelmed by the generosity and courage of people who were risking everything to help her reach safety. "Why are you doing this for me?" Elena asked Ahmad as they prepared to depart. "You could all be killed if Taliban forces discover that you helped me." Ahmad considered the question carefully before responding. "In our religion, we believe that saving one innocent life is like saving all of humanity. You have saved many lives during your service here. Now it is our turn to save yours." Elena and Ahmad began their movement toward the extraction point at midnight, traveling with 2 other men who knew the local terrain and Taliban patrol patterns. The group moved with practiced silence through mountain trails that had been used for centuries by traders and travelers. Their knowledge of the terrain was so complete that they could navigate safely even in complete darkness. The journey toward the extraction point revealed the full extent of the Taliban search operation that was being conducted against Elena. The group encountered multiple patrols and observation posts that had been established specifically to prevent her escape. Ahmad's guides were forced to modify their route repeatedly to avoid enemy forces, adding time and distance to an already dangerous journey. 3 hours into their movement, the group encountered a Taliban checkpoint that hadn't been present during their reconnaissance. The checkpoint consisted of 8 fighters with automatic weapons, positioned to control movement along the trail that led toward coalition territory. Elena realized that Taliban forces were adapting their search methods faster than expected, making her escape increasingly difficult. Ahmad studied the checkpoint through binoculars before developing a plan to bypass the position. The plan required the group to climb over extremely difficult terrain that was rarely traveled even by local inhabitants. Elena's physical condition was still weakened from her week-long journey, but she agreed that attempting to bypass the checkpoint was their only viable option. The climb over the mountainous terrain was exhausting and dangerous, requiring the group to navigate rocky surfaces in darkness while avoiding loose stones that could cause noise or injury. Elena's respect for her guides increased dramatically as she witnessed their skill and endurance while moving through terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. As dawn approached, Elena's group reached the vicinity of the extraction landing zone. Coalition forces had conducted diversionary airstrikes and patrol operations throughout the night, drawing Taliban attention away from the actual extraction site. Elena could hear helicopter rotors in the distance, indicating that her rescue was finally within reach. The final approach to the landing zone required crossing an open area that offered no concealment from observation. Taliban forces would certainly detect any helicopter landing in the area and would respond quickly with available personnel and weapons. Elena realized that the extraction operation would be a race between coalition forces and enemy responses. Ahmad's guides positioned themselves to provide early warning of approaching Taliban forces while Elena moved toward the designated pickup point. She could see the extraction helicopter approaching the landing zone while enemy muzzle flashes indicated that Taliban fighters were already responding to the incursion into their territory. Elena reached the landing zone as the helicopter touched down, but Taliban forces were closing rapidly on the extraction site. Her guides were exchanging fire with enemy patrols while the helicopter crew prepared for immediate departure. Elena realized that Ahmad and his men were sacrificing their own safety to ensure her successful extraction. "They cannot come with us," the helicopter crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. "We only have authorization to extract American personnel." Elena looked back toward the mountains where Ahmad and his men were still fighting to protect her escape route. These courageous people had risked everything to help her reach safety, and now they faced certain death or capture because of their association with her. Elena made a decision that reflected the values and character that had defined her military service. "I'm not leaving without them," Elena shouted back to the crew chief. "These people saved my life, and I won't abandon them to be killed by Taliban forces." The helicopter crew chief understood the tactical situation and the moral imperative that Elena represented. Coalition forces had specific rules about extracting foreign nationals, but exceptional circumstances sometimes required exceptional decisions. After a brief radio consultation with his commander, the crew chief agreed to extract Ahmad and his guides along with Elena. The extraction helicopter lifted off under enemy fire, carrying Elena and for Afghan civilians who had risked everything to save her life. Taliban forces continued firing at the aircraft as it climbed toward safety, but their small arms were ineffective against the armored helicopter at increasing range. As the helicopter flew toward Bagram airfield, Elena reflected on the events of the past week and their broader significance. Her individual decision to provide support for SEAL Team Alpha had saved 13 lives and prevented a significant tactical defeat. But, more importantly, her actions had demonstrated capabilities and courage that would influence military policy for years to come. Elena's successful rescue operation and the circumstances surrounding it were thoroughly documented by military investigators who understood the historical importance of her actions. Her performance during the mountain operation provided concrete evidence that women could perform effectively in combat situations that had previously been considered too dangerous for female personnel. 6 months later, Elena received the Medal of Honor in a ceremony attended by military and political leaders who recognized her actions as a turning point in discussions about women in combat roles. But Elena was more proud of a letter she received from Ahmad Shah Massoud, who had been granted refugee status in the United States along with his family members who had assisted in her rescue. "Dear Elena," Ahmad wrote, "my grandchildren ask me to tell them stories about brave people who help others. Now I tell them about a woman soldier who saved many lives and who never forgot the people who helped her. You have given my family a new life in a safe country. We will never forget your courage and your kindness. Elena Vasquez had entered military service seeking purpose and meaning after personal tragedy. She discovered that heroism isn't about individual glory or recognition, but about making decisions that protect and preserve the lives of others. Her story became part of military history not because she sought fame, but because she understood that courage means putting the welfare of others above personal safety. The mountains of Afghanistan had tested Elena's skills, determination, and character in ways that no training could replicate. She had emerged from that test as a different person, one who understood that true strength comes not from the ability to take lives, but from the wisdom to know when saving lives is more important than following rules. Her legacy would influence military policy and inspire future generations of warriors who understood that heroism knows no gender boundaries. In the end, Elena's greatest achievement wasn't the accuracy of her shooting or the tactical success of her missions. It was her demonstration that moral courage and physical courage are inseparable, and that the best warriors are those who never lose sight of the humanity they are fighting to protect.